Hi, this is Flash Acting 2, Pantomime Acting, and Silhouetted Poses. So let's open up our project file. Our mannequin is in silhouette, and we have a door here. So let's go inside our shot comp. So no definition will please everyone, but pantomime is the art of using movement and facial expressions rather than the spoken word to communicate. We won't get into the history in detail, but pantomime acting began in the 18th, 19th, and 20th century Greece, Italy, and England as a form of comedic and dramatic stage acting. It often involved music and dancing and audience participation. We can see it being used in modern mimes and clowns, and there's still modern pantomime stage performances being done today as an art form on its own. In animation, even when characters are speaking, we will exaggerate poses and timing. We have to project our acting onto the character being shown on screen. In today's class, we'll practice some pantomime acting, focusing on silhouetted poses to clearly convey to the viewer what is happening without any spoken dialogue. Let's just get into the shot comp here, and you'll notice that we have our character layer. You have two options for this class. There's option 1, we're going to have the character struggle to open this door. In option 2, we'll have the character struggle to open up a jar, the lid of a jar. So actually we have option 2 hidden, so let's just hide number 1 and turn on number 2, and you can see that we have this jar. We'll just zoom in. We have a counter, and we have this jar and a lid. So he's going to struggle to unscrew the lid from the jar. So as mentioned earlier, we're going to be using our silhouetted poses and timing, of course, to clearly communicate to the audience that he is definitely trying to open this door, and it's difficult. Same thing with the jar. If you choose the jar, you have to clearly convey to the audience that he's trying to open the lid and he's having a really hard time with it. And of course you can add a twist. I encourage you to add a little twist at the end if you want, like something coming out of the jar, or I'll leave it up to you what kind of twist you want to add. I'm going to choose the door option, just so that if I add new drawings for the door inside the door symbol, you guys can have those in your scene file. Or I'm going to actually go right back to scene 1 here. I need to increase the amount of frames I have. So if you don't already have these frames in your file, you can just insert them up to 100. May have to increase it later. And then we're going to go into the shot comp and up to 100. And we'll go into the characters comp and set that to 100 as well. Okay. So one thing we need to do before we get started, whether you're using the door or the jar, we're going to have to bring the object that the character interacts with, being the door or the jar, into the character's comp. So let's just, you see that each option has a folder. So I'm going to open up our option number 1 folder. And in there we have the doorknob symbol, the door is in a symbol, and the door background. So leave the background where it is in this folder. And we're going to copy the doorknob and the door. Now if you're using option number 2, I'll just expand that. You'd be copying the jar and the lid. So I'm going to copy the doorknob and the door and select those 2 layers, right click, and we'll choose cut layers. And then we'll go inside the shot comp and go right to the bottom where the shadow layer is and select paste layers. And it should put it right above the layer you had selected, which is the shadow. So yeah, so you have doorknob and door right above the shadow layer now. So just select those 2. You can select the frame or do it on stage. And we can see it is now flipped the other way and it's smaller. So we're just going to scale it back up. I'm going to flip it around. Okay, so now when we double click to get back out of our characters comp, we can see we have the character and the door inside the character comp. Alright, so as usual, I'm going to go ahead and animate this. I'm going to block it out first, following our typical workflow of blocking, and then refining the timing, and then further refining everything after. You can follow along with me. I'm going to offer some helpful tips along the way. And then of course do watch the video, but as I mentioned earlier, you guys have done enough animation up until now where you can probably just run with it. You know what has to happen, so you can go ahead and do your own animation. Just watch the video and then you can do your own thing if you like. Alright, so I'm going to start off with blocking this animation out. I'm going to give it a 6-frame hold. You can draw out a little storyboard if you want to thumbnail this on another layer or just on a piece of paper at home. You can go ahead and thumbnail your action just if you want to plan out your poses. But I'm just going to go ahead and wing it here. So I'm thinking I'm going to have him nonchalantly just grab the doorknob and just give it a little pull as if he thinks this door is just going to open. I'm thinking I'm going to have him progressively tugging on it harder. I'll probably have him do it once or twice after the initial pull, and then he's going to get really frustrated. our first pose, we're just going to anticipate before he grabs the doorknob. Just going to lock that shadow layer up. This pose is okay for the anticipation. I'm just going to go 2 frames down the timeline and we'll do the grasp, help him grasp it, the doorknob. Okay, so instead of shifting everything around to get the knees unbent, I'm just going to go back to frame 1 and copy it over. We're using poses that might be close to the pose we need next, and just making our modifications to suit and clear the extra keyframe. That's the only thing when you copy and paste in Flash, it makes that extra row beside, and you have to clear it. It's very annoying. If anyone knows how to fix that, I'm open to any tips on that. So think about last class and the line of action. Really think about where you can put S curves and C curves. You can see the arm's bent this way, and I'm thinking maybe I can get the arm to have like an S curve shape here. So we'll just try that. It doesn't always work out because this is more of a subtle action, so we don't need an extreme pose. Sometimes we can get a nice flowing line going across where the arms are from left to right. Okay, so we're going to leave that left foot planted, and we're going to take a little step. His body has this nice C curve action happening, and there's a bit of an S curve happening with his arms. So we always want to think about how we can create those nice flowing designs in our pose. This is where appeal comes in. I'm just going to go 2 more frames down the timeline, set a key, and we'll just settle him. We'll bring his leg back down. And the purpose for that step is really it's going to give him something to, once his right foot is planted here in this new position, it just gives him a little bit of leverage to open the door. And we don't want to exaggerate this too much because he thinks it's unlocked, so he's just going to try and give it a little pull. I know we usually adjust timing later, but I'm going to move this over so that it's only 1 frame. And I'm going to ease this. 1, 2, 3. We'll go 3 frames down the timeline and just ease that. Just give it a little skew. And always when you skew the character like that, it's really good to break the joints a little bit so that we don't notice that the entire body is moving at the same rate. So let's just give it a little bit of movement or pose changing. So let's just play what we have so far. Okay, so what we want to do here at this point is he's given it a tug, and we're thinking, you have to think about how the characters are going to react to this. It's not opening. So we want him to think for a minute, so let's give him a hold. The use of holds in animation is, I can't explain how important it is. It's used just to give the character a beat or a second to think. So we'll give him a 6 frame hold. Of course, we can change this later if it's not working out. So, okay, so we'll have him tug on it a little harder now, so we're going to give him another little anticipation. Now we needed to anticipate forward toward the door, because he's going to give it another hard yank. We don't want him to anticipate too quickly here. Go 4 frames, give it 3 in-betweens. And let's ease into this. Let's give it a 3 frame ease. 1, 2, 3. Now it's always better to actually pose the character for the eases, but you can see that I've been using skewing quite a bit. I would say the skewing's okay, as long as you break some of the joints and do give him some posing. Now we have to keep in mind we want this hand to stay planted. So when we skew the entire character, the hand's going to move a little bit, so we have to move it back. That's counter animating. It's not always a great idea, but it works here. That'll be just fine. So again, just working on this ease here. I'm just going to move the arm a little bit, and let's bend the head a little bit more for this easing in before he's going to pull back on it again. Alright, so he's leaning in, and now he's going to tug on it much harder. Let's scrub through our animation. This is the first pull is here. So there's anticipation, and let's just give it 2 frames because this is going to be a quick movement back. Alright, so I'm going to leave his hand where it is. Let's not select the hand, but we'll select everything else. We can stretch this arm out a little bit. We're animating, so this is animation, so we can really exaggerate a little bit. Of course, not too much. You don't want to stretch the arm to the point where it looks unnatural. Okay, and we're going to straighten out his arm a little bit. You would do this if you were pulling on something to give yourself some extra weight in the opposite direction. Okay, so what I'm thinking here, I want to get a line of action where he's straight this way. So I'm just going to get his torso, change his torso to number 1. So you can see we have a nice C curve going here, and there's some nice movement with the there's a nice line of action through the arms. We can actually get this up a little higher. Alright, so let's take the onion skinning off, and let's just play this and see how we're looking here. We're going to ease into this pose, or just put a little bit of cushioning at the end of it. That'll be a nice cushion over 6 frames. Lots of in-betweens, drawing spaced close together. I'm going to hold it for 8 frames. Let's have him relax and think about what he's going to do next. So let's go 2 frames down the timeline, and I'm going to set a pose. I'm going to get him into a pose where maybe he's got his hands on his knees and he's staring at the doorknob. I managed to get a little bit of negative space here, and down here is just to bring the torso down a little. And you guys can fine-tune this a little bit better. So let's give it some ease. So we'll just go with 3 frames, set a key, and we'll just stretch him down a little bit. We'll squash him and give him a tiny bit of a stretch. And we'll move his head a little bit. Okay, so now we'll give him that 10 frame hold. Nothing's happening in here, it's just a hold. I'm going to have him put both legs up on the door, one on the wall, one on the door, and just be pulling on this knob. So I'm going to start him into an anticipation pose for this. It's 2 frames down the timeline, and let's get him into this pose. We have his right foot up on the door, and we're planning on having both feet up on the door in the next pose, and both arms on the doorknob, and he's going to be pulling back really hard on it. And we'll ease from the foot, or we'll skew it from the with the pivot from the foot. Then we'll have to reconnect the wrist. So that should help that quick action read a little bit better with the easing. We'll just go 2 more frames down the timeline, set a key. So in 2 frames, we're going to bring them right back. This is going to be very quick. And he's going to be leaning his head back and sort of looking back in the direction that he wants to go. Okay, so this might be a little bit much for the to stretch the arm, but let's just get it into the general position for now. Okay, so we're getting close to the pose that we're going for. I want to leave his knees bent a little bit, because we're going to cycle him back and forth, yanking on this doorknob. I'm just going to give him a very short cycle. Just maybe we'll do it maybe 3 times. Then maybe we'll have him fall back on the ground or something like that. Bring this knee down away from the hand a little bit. These are the things you have to really look at. It's like, where is it getting cluttered here? Even when the character is not in silhouette, we really need to think about this all the time. Just doing that actually improved it by quite a bit. Alright, so let's scrub over this. Alright, now we're going to cycle this a little bit. And we'll set our next pose. We're going to keep his arms and legs, or his hands and his feet, sorry, planted where they are. Feet on the door and hands on the knob. And then we'll just bring his body in a little bit, and he's just going to cycle back and forth, yanking on this knob really hard. And then we'll end it with him maybe falling on the ground. Alright, so let's see how that works. You can see the drawing before it, so it looks like it's going to be okay. Okay, so let's cycle that. So let's just grab this pose where he's extended the most here. And we'll just grab that and copy both these poses. So we're going to copy frames and go 2 frames down the timeline. So this repeats. You can just grab a row and copy, or sorry, paste frames. No, we get rid of that row that Flash puts there for us. Thank you. Alright, so let's take a look at it. I'm going to shut Onion Skinning off for a minute. Okay, so he does it once, twice, and we'll have him do it 1 more time. We're not going to cycle it, we're just going to bring him back to this extended pose, and then we'll ease it. We'll give that 3 frames, so he's going to move a little bit slower on that last tug. And we'll just clear this frame away from our pasting. And we'll give him an ease. And we'll put the pivot on should be on his hands, but maybe closer to the hands. He's struggling, and he'll ease into that final pose nice and slow. And we'll hold it. Just going to go 6 frames for now. I'm going to set another key after the hold, 2 frames down the timeline. Now I think I'm going to have him drop down to the ground in exhaustion and frustration. So I'm going to set a key which gives us some drag on the hands and feet, and the arms, hands, and legs, and feet, and head. We'll drag all those extremities as his body's coming toward the ground. Alright, so he's going to give up here and release the doorknob. But gravity's going to take his hips down first, so we're going to rotate him this way. And we're going to put some drag on his head. Alright, so we have him into this new pose where he's released the doorknob. His feet are still on the door. We'll do one frame down because this is going to be quick. He's dropping now. Okay, so I'm just scrubbing over this animation, thinking what I should do is ease them into this. So sometimes you can just grab a bunch of keys and 1, 2, 3, slide it over 3 frames. I'm going to go in 3 frames into our hold and just set a key. Just sort of working backwards here a little bit. But you can do this, you know, this is not a big deal. It's just a matter of shifting keys over, setting a new key, and then making an adjustment on a pose. So you just got to get this pose to go a little bit closer to that pose. I'll put the pivot to the hands and I'll just skew it over a little bit. And take a look at the next one. His head tilts a little bit, or quite a bit. So I'm just going to actually add a little bit of a tilt to the head. And then we'll play over that, we'll scrub over that. There. So we have a little bit of an ease into the next pose. Alright, so I'm going to make an adjustment to this one. I'm going to get it a little bit more, so it's halfway in between these two. Right, so we're going to just finish this off now. The last thing I want to do is squash this position, squash this pose, because he impacts the ground, and then settle him back up. Before we squash it, let's key another frame down the timeline. Let's go right to the end. I'm just going to key this so that I can get back to his original unsquashed position. And we'll go back to this frame, first one where he impacts the ground. Let's select all of them, put that pivot point down between his heel and his hip, just so we get this nice squashing effect. Be nice to bend the elbows. And we'll just scrub over that and see how that looks. That's better. It really helps when you bend the elbows and the knees for this sort of thing. I'm going to add some more frames to the end of this animation, just so we have a bit of a hold at the end as well. I'll go up to 110. So frames, and I'll have to do the same thing for the shot, for the scene one and the shot comp. Alright, so let's play this now. Alright, so let's tween this. Let's go through and just tween all these. And let's play it now and see how that looks. It's a little easier with silhouetted characters. You don't see all the small imperfections. So let's just scrub through slowly and look for any breakage. Okay, so there's some here. So I can see the knees breaking apart, the elbows breaking apart here. Let's just play it again. I want to make sure that our timing is where we want it to be before we start fixing these joint breaks in between the key poses. So it definitely reads clearly what's happening here. One area that I'm noticing where I can make a timing change, and it's right here when he first grabs it. It doesn't really look like he's pulling it. It just looks like he's sort of leaning on it. So I want to get this. I might make a pose change as well. Okay, so what I want to do is actually add a bit of a hold for this position. Maybe it just might be an extra frame or two before he pulls back. Grab everything from the pose after that to the end, and we'll drag it back. Let's drag it back 2 frames. It's a lot easier to make these timing changes now rather than once we have keys in between our key poses. Alright, so I'm going to bring this pose back so it looks like he's pulling on the door a little more. That's really extreme, but this one it can be a little bit more extreme, just so that it reads better and it holds for quite a while. So, and then I'll have to copy and paste it because it holds right up to frame 25 here. So let's go in the first frame of that pose and just make an adjustment. So really what I want to do is just have him lean back just a little more. That looks more like a pull. So we'll just copy this and paste it over here so we have our hold. And we'll get rid of those extra keys. Clear keyframe. And let's see how that works. Let's play it. Actually, this is pretty quick. From our first anticipation to when he makes contact with the doorknob. So I'm actually going to separate those keys out a little bit too. Just 1 frame, see how it looks. And that looks a little better. Just that first grab and pull back. Alright, so I'm going to check the next section. Okay, when he really pulls hard on it. And ease and a hold. So I think for that hold, we'll just make it a moving hold and we'll continue to ease. Just a tiny, tiny bit. So I'll place that down at the heel. And we'll just skew it a little bit. So it's really slight. That should look a little bit better, just so it's not static. And then the next section, when he releases it, it's too quick, so we'll have to slow that ease down a little bit. So let's just watch that section. Let's try and use Flash's ease function to soften that a little bit more. So we go into properties here and change that to 100. Okay, that seems to work okay. Right before the ease, I'm just going to go to the head, give it a little bit of overlapping, just so the head moves at a quicker rate than the rest of the body, and that helps it out a little bit. Just gives it a nice little finesse. We'll play that. And we can even go to the layer where the head is. Let's give it 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll go about halfway down where this hold is. And let's set a key and just have the head continue to move. We'll give it a nice settle. So let's play that. Okay, and it bobs back to the other position. So we'll have to copy this and paste it here before he starts to move again. So that's nice. So the head keeps moving a little bit independent of the rest of the body. Okay, and I notice his foot sliding here. It's a little bit too much, so we'll just move it in a little bit. Okay, it's still happening a tiny bit, but you guys can make sure that doesn't happen in your files. So the arm, this arm pops up and it sticks. I'm going to have that settle up a little bit just to soften that pose. We can do more with this, but for now I'm just going to get that's the worst of it. And then he starts to move again. So I'm just going to get this arm to settle up right in the area where it first hits, and then I'm going to go to the frame after and just settle it up a little bit. Add a little bit of ease to that. Maybe have the hand come up a little too, just so it's not so hard. I'll do the same thing with the head. This foot comes up, just looking at the right foot, it comes up real fast. So let's just bring it down a tiny bit, maybe just from the knee down. And let's scrub over that. See, that's a little bit better. Just gives it an ease into the pose. And I think the rest of it's okay. That settle worked out nice on the way down. Alright, so let's just go through and fix our joint breakage. And I think we're going to be good. Okay, so we have one here. We can go through and do the whole upper body and then look for breakage in the lower body. There's not much though here, just from looking at it earlier. We'll fix that one. Let's keep scrubbing through. Okay, we have one on the next. We'll have to set keys on that on all those in-betweens, and then just go through and fix one at a time. Okay, and we'll get the hand. Let's get that hand to drag a little bit. Okay, so that looks a little bit better. The other arm's okay. Okay, so the torso, I notice here, pops off a little bit. We'll just fill in that whole in-between area with a selection and key it. Just going to skew it a bit and shift it. Do the same here. And we'll play over that, and that looks okay. Okay, so we have a forearm issue here. And I think this is just a matter of putting him back into place, but we might be able to add some drag. So the arm is on its way up, so we can drag that hand. Okay, so for this in between, the arm is completely invisible. Well, let's just see what we have here. The action goes from the arm being right behind him, and he's swinging it to grab the doorknob. So let's just get the hand in more of a silhouette. Maybe we can put it like this. I know the arms are all jumbled up in front of his body, but just key those two. And let's see what we can do with that. Let's get a better silhouetted pose here. That'll work nicer. So we'll just fix this forearm and take a look. That's fine. Then we have our cycle, an ease, drop, squash, and settle. Alright, so I'm going to check the legs now. You know what? The legs are fine. Alright, so let's just play this whole thing and see how it turned out. Of course, I can continue to go through and refine the timing a little bit more, adding in extra poses where I need to, to overlap and drag. But for now, I'm going to leave it at this. So for this class, please send me your blocking before you refine anything. Block out your basic timing. Do adjust your timing on your blocking to get it to the point where you're happy with it. But don't do any of the adjustments in between key poses. Thanks, and we'll see you in the next class.